Anytime you're ready.
Today is August 29th, 2023. My name is Ginger Thomson, and we are recording an oral history interview for the South Dakota State Historical Society. Margaret, may I have your full name and have you spell it, please, for me?
Margaret Denton, M-A-R-G-A-R-E-T, and then D-E-N-T-O-N.
And Margaret, do I have permission to record this interview?
Pardon?
Do we have permission to record
Yes,
the interview?
yes.
Okay. Well, first let's start off where and when you were born. Let's start with the very beginning and tell us about early life.
I was born in Nebraska in 1926.
And tell us just a little bit about your childhood. How did it shape you? What was it like?
Yeah. Well, I had two older brothers, and they kept saying, "Oh, stop acting." And of course, I liked acting, but they would say, "You know, you're just making all that up." But I did have a very good youth. My mother passed away of cancer when I was 11. So that was a whole new, and then the brothers were, my oldest was about 12 years older than I was. So for a long time, I was the one at home with my father, and then he remarried when I was in probably about junior or senior of high school. So.
Do you remember, what was your first job?
My first job was at a drugstore at the soda fountain. And I would be aware that the owner, the wife, would be at the end of the counter, and occasionally she'd come and say, "You're giving your friends too much ice cream." And then I worked in the hat department of a department store. And so that was the beginning of my so-called professional life. But after college, I was a box office person at the University of Nebraska Theater for about 4 years. Then had a family.
What did you study at the university?
I was in theater and wanted to be, one of the big of my life. I was auditioned for a play, and the director didn't pick me, and so I said, "Why did you pick the other person over me? What was different that you felt she deserved the role?" And he said, "Well, not anything, but the war is over. This is WW2, and I know your boyfriend's coming, and you'll get married. And so I'm not going to spend any more effort on working with you." Well, if I'd been a feminist, I think there would have been a different reaction from me at the time, but there wasn't. However, later on, he hired me as the University Theater's box office for about 4 years. So he made it up to me.
Was that better than being involved?
No, well, it ended up that I married an actor instead of being an actor. That's right. So I supported him then, and he became a professor, and so my acting years didn't go on, so to speak. Yeah.
Well,
But supporting of theater all the way. Yeah.
absolutely.
Still do.
Tell us about the career path of your life and the journey to get from there to today.
Oh, it's been exciting. I used to go to meetings and people would say, "What do you do?" That means, "What is your job?" And I would say, "I'm a professional volunteer." So I did a lot of that work through my lifetime, particularly for nonprofit groups. And then I was a state director for 6 Protestant churches that did campus ministry on all the state schools. So I saw that we got people hired, qualified ministers, to be represent these 6 denominations, and so I did that for quite a few years. And during that time, one of the so-called professional volunteers, the center at Brookings, Campus Ministry Center, offered some space, and some of the women began to decide we needed a women's center. So that's what we did from 74 to early 80, was to run a women's center, and I was the founding director of that, along with my other job.
So when did the shift to becoming a feminist happen for you?
During, well, the awareness and the consciousness in the 70s, certainly, that brought some of us in Brookings together to say, we need to work with other women. And we're not the only ones that feel that things are not quite right for women and the relationships. And of course, we then had some counselors and did one-to-one work, but we also did a lot of workshops for people and had consciousness. And then the big thing was that we realized that domestic abuse was an issue in our community and in our state that we needed to address. And that ended up to be quite a job. Very proud of.
Was that what the Women's Center was about, or did that have a different function when it started?
No, they both would be the consciousness of raising women, and more to see that both through counseling and small group discussions that, yes, this was an issue, either physically or psychologically, and so we had a long way to go to, well, okay, so what do we do about women if they need to leave the home? So then we got, individual people that offered to take some in, and then one of the motels offered, and slowly, finally, we were able to find a home that we could call a shelter, and did a lot of work. So with that, I'm very proud of how we still have a very good shelter in Brookings and across the state. There are several. But getting funding and all of that, I worked hard to get it established that shelters for women and children and whatever was something real, and did happen in the state as well as in individual towns and rural areas, either psychologically abuse or often physical.
Had it been somewhat swept under the rug prior to that time, the issue of domestic abuse?
Not much. I remember going to one of the state agencies, talking to them about it and finding out where some financial support would be. The answer from the men in the community, well, South Dakota doesn't have physical abuse, domestic abuse. What are you talking about? Came home, had a group, both police and ministers, got the same response. Police certainly would say, oh yes, we do. But we didn't get much support, so it was hard work. Training the police of how they would interrupt, say, a domestic abuse, and getting more and more people, some more conservative ministers, to not blame the women for maybe some physical abuse or psychological abuse happening to them from their spouse or in their home. So we got it going, and Brookings still has a really good shelter for women. At the time, some towns had children's shelters, but we just kept women and children together. And I worked across the state with others, particularly with the reservation, and to help have a coalition that we could work together and see that we got some funding. That's for sure. That was one of the big issues that we had to face.
Tell us about why it was important to have a coalition with some of the with Native American women.
Yes, it really was. They also were seeing abuse, but they seemed to be a little ahead of us. But slowly, people like we got interested in whether they could afford a shelter or at least some place for safe going and what they could do. And one of the women that was really active, Native American, said, well, wait a minute. This is what you do. But we realized that they were used to going to the federal government or the state government. And we were novices. Oh, is that what you do? Okay, we're going to write a grant. Well, what do we have to do? So it was wonderful to get the two groups together and meet at least once or twice a year and talk about our issues and help each other to know what's the next step, what can you do. So any of these coalitions that at that time during the 70s that we could meet with other women, no matter where they were, big towns or small. I remember going to Minneapolis because we heard there was a good shelter there in an older home. And so it was reaching out, how do we do this? How do we do this together? So that was a good way.
Let's transition into how and why you became involved in the Commission on the Status of Women and the ERA.
One of the things, I think my first one was I was invited to be in a film sponsored by the Commission on the Status of Women of the first woman that was a state legislature. And that was Gladys Pyle. And her husband had been, and then when he passed away, they put her in his place, and she served. Well, I went out to Pierre, and they still had their home there. And so I have a picture of it, of Gladys. Remember coming down a beautiful stairway in her house, all dressed up, and so that was something. Then they circulated the Commission on the Status of Women, and they had also we had Gladys Pyle was one person, but we had a suffragette that came because her daughter lived in Aberdeen, and then there was a couple that began to do some historical movies, and that was one way that the Commission on the Status of Women was helping, and also money. But again, it didn't last long when the money was cut out, and that was the end of that commission and the various ways they could help women.
So then what happened after the CSW?
Well,
there
there wasn't any state agency, so
Okay.
to speak, to go to.
Okay.
It all, again, was, okay, individually, how do you work together as much as you could, hear others of what they did, and again, yes, as volunteers, we could do the work, but it would get to the point where this is going to cost us some money, and then safe places of that, and I remember the first place that we did get, we had to stop surfing there because it was not handicap accessible. And it was an older house, and it had a couple of upstairs middle school and the basement that we used. So again, and then we were lucky to find a better place that met all the rules, and we could afford, yeah. And we had a student that was on SDSU Housing Committee, and she took over and said, hey, yeah, no, I'll go to the city and see what we can do. So we got help from the city, yeah.
Okay, so who are some of the people who were involved in the CSW with you?
There were actually quite a few, but Ruth Alexander was the woman. Ruth was a professor at SDSU in the English department, and she was a member of the thing. And there were a lot of women's groups that don't exist now, that League of Women Voters, all kinds of organizations that you met and you did it together, not just as individual people having ideas, well, let's do this. And that was very helpful. So you had both local and this organization as a state. And then I became a delegate in 1977 to the International Women's Institute in Houston, Houston, Texas. And that was, to me, one of the major things that the commission established a role when was to organize that and get delegates. And we had several from South Dakota that went to a very exciting time, yeah. Meeting all the national women that were involved in women's issues, yeah, so.
Is that background noise affecting things?
I can sure hear it.
Yeah. I just thought maybe we'd take a drink of water while it fades out a little bit. Would that be okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Are those jets revving up?
I think they are, yeah.
I'm-
Compressor or something.
I think I got it open.
A little bit.
Oh, do you need some help?
Oh, I'm good. You got it.
Oh, just about got it open. Yep, see, you have the right trick.
Got it?
Thank you.
You got it loosened up for me.
Is the pace going all right, or am I talking too long on your
No, I
questions?
think it's perfect. What do you think?
Yep, absolutely.
It's great.
Any stories you want to share, Margaret, we'd love to hear them.
Okay.
That's okay, just tell me when.
And go ahead.
Margaret, you mentioned that a lot of these women's groups are no longer in existence.
Yes,
What
yeah.
do you think happened?
Well, probably. Even though they might not be involved with the commission, just the thought that there was a group, a state group, that was there that was advocating for women is a big thing. But individually, like I was a member of the League of Women Voters, and one of the things was that in our city, any committee that was a city committee, you would get one of the members to go and be an observer and just sit and listen and bring it back, that news. This is what our town's struggling with. Before this, I had been on the planning commission, and one of the issues that came up was, Watertown has all this commercial land and businesses all the way from the time you turn to get into Watertown all the way downtown. Let's commercialize 6th Street. Well, I lived on 5th Street. And so I talked to some of the neighbors and said, you know what they're planning to do is change the zoning so this can become business. Well, wait a minute, you could have any kind of a store or car repair or whatever in your backyard. Well, they didn't do it, but here we are now, beginning again to commercialize. But it was very interesting. The mayor at that time wrote me a letter and said, you know, I understand you're so busy in so many things, I'm not going to reappoint you to the Planning Commission. So that was my chance to say, oh, okay, you went too far.
But you spoke up, and that's the point, that people should speak up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and you do. That's very much a concern of mine. As I said, I've been basically a volunteer. One time I was in 12 agencies, committee, statewide, local, whatever. That was a little too much. So I promised myself I would never be on a board or agency or committee more than 6 years at a time. And I've had to remind myself every once in a while because, well, wait a minute, I like that group. You know, oh yeah, Margaret, you said no more. But anyway, the point was that often women, particularly, say, yeah, I'll be on that committee. And my concern is then you need to speak up. If you do not understand what they're proposing, tell them. Question that. And that goes on to this day. I just left a couple committees and said right away, okay, who's going to take my role of speaking up and getting clarified as to what we are faced, what we need to decide, all of this. Or if you disapprove of something, say it. Don't wait and then go out and tell your neighbor, oh, I wish I'd done that, thus and so, said something before it got too late. So
Overall,
that's a place where we learned, I think, that what was going on in our city, and it's too bad. And after some, you know, we blame so much now on the covert that we had the last few years of people, you know, not getting out, going and meeting and socializing and going to their committees that they used to go to, of what really did happen, that just couldn't get women, and probably it was more and more women were working full-time. They not only had their families, but had full-time jobs that they didn't have before. And so it's been too bad, and hopefully it can slowly come back, because it's hard to not work as an individual and make a lot of difference, but to be with others that can say, let's do this together.
because there's strength in numbers.
Yep. Yep.
So what would you know, at the time that you were most involved in some of these initiatives, what was the political and cultural environment like?
Well, I would say, of course, the whole issue on the abortion issue, the very beginning of that, and locally, you began to feel, I know I went to talk to groups, and another woman, a friend who was opposite of how I felt about choice, would come to the meetings, and I realized then we're just not on the same road here together, and hope that doesn't damage our friendships and so on. And so once I had a group of people said, hey, I think you ought to put your name in for mayor. And somebody else said, oh no, she'll be cited as a single woman, issue woman. She won't make it. Yeah.
Seriously.
And at that time, I was very much involved in the domestic abuse issues and trying to get what we could get in our community. So I had to laugh at that. Oh, is that how you look at me? Yeah. But so it was tough at that time to get women into various roles of importance that would deal and but as far as politics, that has never been the biggest issue of keeping me personally from doing the work that I'm interested in and want to see that changes are made or whatever. So.
Couldn't you see that you could have affected change in the legislature, perhaps?
Oh, probably. I don't know. Certainly, this is a more conservative state, and most of us realize that, whether it's... So any help through the years that I have worked that you could get to help change some of the things that we as women feel have through the years that need changing. And it goes on today. I mean, we still have the need for a shelter, and we have a good one. And we still need women to be educated on some of the issues. I think one of the big things, after I retired, I was asked to be a National Women's Initiative spokesperson for AARP. And it was an exciting thing because we were taken into Washington twice a year to hear about all of the research that AARP was doing. And then the thing was to come back to South Dakota and one of the things was women and finances. A lot of middle-aged women, when their spouse would pass away, were frantic. I've never done this. I have a personal member in my family that didn't know what the budget was. Kept saying, well, I didn't work at a full-time job. I don't have any money. And I would say, yeah, well, of course you do. You have money. You put money, it goes into, well, Social Security. Well, but I didn't have a job. It didn't work, yeah. But getting women, one of the things was, how do you acknowledge what your role is financially in a family situation when you're left and have to know all that? Will you know all of that? And so that, I think, was one of the big issues that I dealt with as we met women in small groups and just individually. And hopefully that's changed now. I'm sure it has.
Do you consider that one of your biggest successes?
Yes, yeah.
Excellent.
And just being conscious of their role as equal rights is, oh my. That was a tough time going through getting the amendment changed. Remember, I think it must have been with AARP and a group of us, we were going, let's protest, let's go. What building do we go to protest? and stand in front of and shout. Oh, my husband and I did on ERA, we did a debate against each other on the steps of the Brookings post office. We had quite a crowd that was there. A lot of our friends, of course, but others. What are they doing? They're standing on the steps arguing with each other. And so as both past actors, we had fun doing that. Did it a couple other times at places, arguing about equality.
I assume he was playing devil's advocate.
Yes, oh gosh, of course, yeah.
Because he was quite a believer in women.
Yeah, oh yeah, he knew all about it, yeah.
Why do you think that women hadn't been considered equal?
Wow, that belongs a long time ago. A long time ago. And some people would use the Bible to say that, you know, what you should do and not do. But it was that the men could take care of us. And that's one reason why you got married, was that you didn't have to make any decisions. He would. And you could. So it was tough at times. And the whole thing of work equality. And even now, it's like, well, since I was at the end of World War II, I was horrified that we as women at the end of the war got messages somehow to our brain. Quit your job. The men are coming home. They need jobs. And I had two friends that one worked, was a repper, out on the West Coast, working and learning how to do unbelievable jobs of working on ships and doing the mechanical work. Do you think she could come back and get hired as that? And her knowledge was just nothing. Plus, this kind of soft message through advertisement or whatever, the men are here, they need good jobs, you need to quit. And that was really, and of course, I was just in college, and that was overwhelming to find that out. I wasn't, okay, what kind of job? Well, you're not going to get a job. You're going to get married, as my director said. I'm not going to put the effort into any training you anymore. So
eventually, then you did, though, get married and had a family.
Yeah.
And stayed home with them, though all the while working on these issues through the course of your life?
Yep. Yeah. And I was busy as all get out. You can't be on 12 boards and agencies and not be busy. Yeah. But I enjoyed it, had the talent to work with people, and so that's good. I still not on that many. I told myself that's too much. Yeah, my family said that's too much too. So
you talked a little bit about the importance of women and money, and how you worked on getting that message out to women. Did you find that you personally had any difficulty getting access to credit as a woman or to money?
Oh, no, I remember when I got my first credit card with my name on it, and I still have it. I mean, I still have that company. But that was wonderful. That was a great thing for we women who actually got our name on anything. And even recently, I went to one of the agencies that you need, and I had some official business to do, and I was asked to get, she knew my husband had passed away, but she said, I need a certificate of his death. This was like 12 years after he passed away. And I said, wait a minute. You've been accepting my card to pay for this process that I'm having to pay for, and you've accepted that. And now you can't, you have to see his death certificate. And I tell everybody, don't ask for 10 death certificates. You'll need more than that to dish out to prove, that you have the rights to take care of business that needs taking care of. So that was a big thing to get Margaret H. Denton on business issues and things.
And now,
And I still do, still get Clarence Denton.
yeah.
That they know better. I'm the one that sends them the check. What in the world? They printed on it with my name, but that's been a tough thing for women to realize that their name doesn't mean as much as their spouses.
How about women on the farm or the ranch? Do you think that?
That is a tough question. I remember being in the Women's Center, getting a call from a farm woman, and she had been having some abuse issues. And of course, one of the first things I would say was, do you have a friend that is aware of what you're going through? Do you have some money that you could put away? And then do you have a place that you could hide some clothes and some personal thing that if you need to leave your house? Well, that was just unheard of for them, being way out in the country, of not having a close neighbor, not having access, how do I get to town, that kind of thing. And that's still an issue of people rural, of not having a close, and many other small towns. I remember trying to help other small towns begin to set up some kind of service for people in their community that maybe needed to get away. And so that continues to be an issue. And I did ask about how is the work with older rural people going on? And again, that's an issue of money and how do you get staff qualified to be able to go out and see people and so on. So we still have to find out how to help. And it's not just physical, it's psychological of staying in. I've been really concerned about people, particularly women, giving up in the last couple of years, going out, being with other people, attending things, and wait a minute, psychologically, that's going to be tough on it. We worry about youth, but we need to also about older people, and to me, turning on the Zoom is not the same as walking out the door, being gone, being with others, and keep up your socialization, no matter how it is. It's healthy.
So, on the issue of domestic abuse, are there any anecdotes that you can share that some of the survivors had shared with you about their appreciation for getting them out of that situation and,
Yeah.
and how the future turned out?
Yeah, for one thing, I mean, you know, people say consciousness raising. What's that all about? You know, but that was a big issue of helping women to understand. No, you don't deserve this. This wasn't your fault. There are two people in this situation. You know, where do you go? How do you ask for help? And whether that's a friend, but now that we do have qualified people, a place that is great to go and stay and be out of the situation, and then to help you negotiate, because now, even when we were doing this for women, it would be, but wait a minute, what about the men? Well, it's not my experience. You need to find another man that wants to start a support group. And that's never really quite happened to any extent. Yes, men do have others and friends to talk to and so on, but here we've never really had as much concentrated effort of working. Now, I should take that back. Maybe now we do have that kind of thing, and it's never been, you know, it's been a hard thing for people to say, well, I'm going to see somebody to talk about my problems. And we have help there, but then to get the person, whether it's male or female or young people, to say, I need help. So that's what we're fortunate of, that we do have people, lots of people here to give help in domestic abuse issues. Yeah.
As you look back on the rich life and the impact that you have had on so many people, what do you think were your most significant accomplishments?
I think my whole issue of being concerned about human rights of all spans, not just women, is something that I've had, and I've kept it up, and I still have it. And I was honored by getting one of the first awards from the city on human rights. And so I guess I would say that I am a human rights person, and for a long time have tried to make life better for all of us. And it certainly doesn't end with me or any of my cohorts. We always need that kind of care, whatever it is, of people in our community. And it's wonderful that we do have a commission on that now, and they work hard on diversity. And here we are, a little rural community that doesn't have as much diversity as other places do, but certainly, and I guess one of the other things, I'm pleased that the Historical Society is working on this, because when I hear that there's banning of books in our schools on our history, that has got to stop. And we need to know our history, good and bad. And that's something that's up against our state, and I'm sure our community. And we're fortunate to have a human rights committee here that's working and signs out. We have to do more of that. This is not a good sign to me.
or what would you consider to be your biggest influences? Is there somebody or something that influenced you most to do what you did?
Well, no. I can't think of it. As I said, I lived in a town in Nebraska that was about like this. We had a black family who happened to own the garbage business. We had a couple of families that were Jewish. I didn't know that until another girl and I were going to go to the University of Nebraska, and we wanted to room together. And we got to Lincoln, and this group of women descended upon us, took her aside, and said, "You can't have a dorm with her. We're putting you in a Jewish dormitory." Well, she was shocked. I was shocked. Here we lost our friendship practically. So that was new to me, way back in high school, but not in big, just an incident, a couple incidences. But I did not live in a diversified city or community, or even much in college. And so I just slowly got into this. No big deal at all. It just was an awareness on my part and my family's part. And then my husband was not only a theater director, but also a filmmaker. And he got humanities grants, and one of the big ones, he made 2 films with Native American people. And since it was a humanities thing, one of the things was to go with his film, it was a 3-dimensional films at that time, and have discussions with groups. So I went along with him quite a bit. And this was not for Native Americans, for goodness sake. It was their lives, but it was for we Anglos that don't understand our Native American sisters and brothers that live in this state. And so that was a huge welcoming of observant. But on the black end, my husband for graduate school was going to go to Louisiana State University, and his mother said, "Oh no, oh my, will you be able to exist down there? That's a whole different world, We went down there, and it was in the 50s. There was a lot of disturbance I was hired at the School of Music, not to be a secretary or administrator. There was a woman that did that. But for the first time, the University of Louisiana was going to admit black graduate students. And she could not go to the counter and do that. So they hired me because I was from the North, that I could go and register these black students. So then we got into the whole issue of discrimination in a big way. And the theater was in one part of this building and the music in the other. And I volunteered, they used the same theater. I volunteered since I'd been a box office manager to run it. So I'd sit there and people, black and white, would come to go to whatever the performance was. And I sold them tickets wherever. Well, I went to the first one. It was a play, sat in there. People got up and walked out. White people, they would not sit. That was my awakening as far as race, so much. and with my husband going and doing the films on Native American. And so I guess that's a long answer to my short question of where was my consciousness raised. Yeah. So not only sex, but race also has been a big part of my life, yeah.
And yet, even though you grew up not being exposed to a lot of that, you couldn't understand why there was that kind of attitude. It sounds like you were just
Yeah,
appalled that people weren't
well,
equal.
wasn't that, yeah, that's right. We weren't, unfortunately, brought up with a diverse community in our lives, and but we sort of learned. So we left, and they offered my husband a job down in the South, and I said, no, we can't do this. We can't make any difference. So he took a job in South Dakota, and Nebraska did not have as many, we hardly, I think, one reservation. So it was all new. My husband came home after a couple of weeks and said, wait a minute. I didn't realize there's racism here as well as down in Louisiana. What is this? It's all over.
Wow. How does the political and cultural environment for women today in 2023 compare to the environment for women in the 60s, 70s, and 80s?
I think it's about the same. I'm sorry. It's tough. Here we are, back again, over some of the same issues. Keeps bubbling up. I don't know. It's tough work. And whether it's nationally or statewide, we need to be aware always of the situations, and is human rights and equality uppermost in people who choose to have power and do have power, what they could be doing to we the people.
What do you think about South Dakota as a place to live?
Well, that's part of my thoughts of yes, we live in a more conservative. Yes, we're not all conservative. Yes, we have different views about this. And yes, we who, and I consider myself in the minority, need to keep aware of what's happening in our school board, in our city commission, and in the state, and speak up and say, yes, I have the right. Yes, I don't agree with this. And if we don't do it, then you can't say, well, gosh, I have no say-so. Yes, you do. We do. And but we need to keep alert, and I think that continues in South Dakota and the state and United States, and be involved.
Is that your main message to aspiring activists?
Yep, be involved. Go do it together. Get another group. Where are the women's groups? I stood on this corner this summer to begin with over the issue of abortion issues. And I looked, I thought, wait a minute, where are the young women? Where are the young people? We're all older. We've been through this before. Slowly, here came a group, and slowly. And so I know it's tough for people with full-time jobs and families to get involved in other important issues, but I hope that that kind of thing is rejuvenating and getting together with others in concern and feel that you have the right to do that.
Finally, Margaret, what one story should you tell to keep it from being forgotten?
We as women are a very important part of history. Do not lose us. And I hope that down the line, as I had a theater friend, the kids don't want to hear about the old times. Wait a minute. I hope people will do research, will not lose the history that women have gone through, and men. But I'm the most interested in our women's history. And I hope it's kept alive, and what all has been done, and the people who've been working hard, that other women will emerge and do the same thing, because it's not ended. Yes, there are better jobs. Yes, there's places to go if you feel you need help. Yes, that is, but it won't be there unless we continue to see that money is provided where needed and help. Volunteer help is needed. When I look down on all the committees and cities, they need volunteers. That's what makes the city become a good city, that good people will step forward and say, yes, I want to be on that committee.
Is there anything you would like to add that we have not talked about, Margaret?
Nope. Good luck to all of us, and speak up.
Thank you. Anything you guys want to add?
I don't want to backtrack. That was such a good,
What?
ominous ending perhaps, but I wouldn't mind hearing a little bit more about the International Women's Year.
Oh.
And you had talked so well about women and credit. I wonder if we could talk just briefly about childcare, women and health insurance.
About what?
So I wouldn't mind if you could talk a little bit about the International Women's Year.
Okay.
Because that was that big box that you gave us, right?
Sure.
And then, in the same way that you had talked about women and finances, maybe could you touch base a little bit on childcare, like the difficulty in getting childcare, the difficulty in getting insurance for women?
Okay.
I think you probably have a couple things to say about that too.
Okay. Yeah.
So maybe just International Women's Year, and again, childcare,
Okay.
poverty for
Sure.
women,
Sure.
insurance.
Yeah.
Could we do that for a few minutes?
Yeah.
I don't want to backtrack. It was such a good end note, but maybe we'll weave it. Maybe we'll weave it in there somehow.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Still good.
Is that good? Okay. Margaret, could you tell us a little bit more about International Women's Year?
Yes, I was delighted to think that I was a delegate, and a friend of mine, very close, was also chosen as one, and so we went together to Houston. And we had been close in church work and some other things. We didn't live in the same town, but we had joined. There were about 4 of us. I lived in Brookings, maybe 2 did, and the other 2 lived in Sioux Falls, but for years, once a month we got together. So we were very close, and it was fun to go to Houston because we were both been raging feminists, and we knew all these wonderful women that they had to be speakers. And to go there and all the literature that was out there, we were in 7th heaven. hear all the big names were there to talk to us and pick up books, and it was quite an honor and quite a delight that we didn't have to just open a book and read about what people were doing and saying in other places, but see them on the stage and meet them, and then having the I came home with all this information and kept it up in the attic for so long, and then I still have all these feminist books in my library, and I thought, gee whiz, this is important information. This was something, and so glad when I made the call to find the Historical Society willing to take that. And somebody sometime will wipe their master's degree and go and look up all about that conference and what it meant to many of us, and what good it did.
That is a great idea. What kind of information is in that box?
Well, pamphlets and the outline and who the speakers were, and somewhere I ran into, I think there were like 12 women from South Dakota, but I cannot find the list of those. But it was so big and overwhelming for Ginny and I that we stuck together and oohed and awed, and okay, did you get that pamphlet? And did you pick up this? And so it was just sitting in this box. I thought, this has got to be important. And so glad that, because it was an important meeting, and again, it was the beginning of small groups here and there working together, saying, hey, we want to meet you who live, internationally in another country, and so on. So, very good.
Thank you. Also then, could you talk a little bit about the difficulty that women have had, women have been charged with in getting child care, getting insurance, things like that? Have you seen that we've struggled with that over the years, and has that changed?
Well, right now, I'm having some trouble getting mail. Instance, I sent a birthday card to one of my family with a check in it, and oh, by the way, I didn't get it. I ordered something else. Well, somebody told me it's a lack of workers. Well, wait a minute, we hear that more and more, and it's just across the United States. And then you think, well, wait a minute, is that true? Are there a lot of people that don't want a job, don't need a job, or are there people that need a job and want a job and need to take care of their family? I hope that gets kind of worked out some way. But this whole thing of, in my age group, if we had a family, we pretty much, if we were able, stayed at home. And our job, it was a job, to be the housewife, to take care of the house, to take care of the kids, and so on. And then as people did get employment, did get out of the home and needed somebody to take care of I have 2 great-grandchildren, and I'm interested in, okay, who's in preschool and where are they going? Oh, it's a neighbor. Okay, well, the neighbor said no, she couldn't take anymore. Where do you get qualified? And then another step. And you're looking, and I happen to live across from the Boys and Girls Club, and I've just been overwhelmed this summer of all the cars. Wait a minute. There are kids in there, and these must be teachers helping to teach these kids. Then I found out that an alternative school, that the Boys and Girls Club in their activity, high school building and all, is letting an alternative school, this is for kids who is not working, public school, they are letting them use that building to run, and I said, well, are we paying for that? Well, no. And my daughter is also in one of those. And kids are important. We need to be with them from the time they were born. And maybe we personally can't be, but we need good people who can be with them through their lifetime of education. And so it's very important for us as women to see that that happens, whether we have the money or the spouse or whoever does, or other agencies and so on. So it's a constant thing. And even if we had everybody working with high wages, it still would be a problem of our kids and how they are taken care of at the very highest levels that we can possibly provide. I don't know if that answers your question.
Good, okay.
But it's been hard, yes, to get insurance, as I said. Everything's my husband. It's still, he's passed away 15 years ago, and I still get his name on everything. You know,
Why can't they?
like, wait a minute. Is somebody looking at who's paying the bill? It's not Clarence Denton. It's Margaret Denton. So
Be aware.
it's be aware, yeah.